Hello, I'm offering to Russia and to Ukraine if they get America's leaders or President Trump to agree to you guys. I'll sell you guys, and you can own it. In other words, I'll donate for you guys to buy it to you from for yourselves. A hyper peace defense system, because where there is hyper peace the right way /s the right way, it generates more ways causing positive, only capable of causing positive value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures, and or else we sense. But this requires a nature of business, of industry capable of being this, to afford to be its nature too. But we have not had that nature. We have our founders' communications to us forced, replaced, and forced self-valued roles with that. Suits and ties, counters, exceptions, and the differences as self-valued collusion /s as an array being and having been used remotely by the breaching method, the hyper foreign. It came from before religious messengers were born. Nature itself is showing us it's more probable that from off campuses and ancient exceptions to that, preserved recollection of how everything had unfolded to united memory of the revelations demonstrated to us by nature before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrought, re-engineerings of these ancient bases, like the republic for which we stand, the legion paces, but now with stolen names /s and tactically criminally re-engineered styles of fact-cheating nature, fact-cheating nature itself, self-valued criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments like peace. Nature shows us to discern the difference between criminal and seditious natures of peace and peace that is hyper peace as its own difference. And as its difference appreciated here, where evolution's fruits, gifts, and means come out of nowhere, it can't help that from happening when we use its system and method, including especially so many ways, especially differentially though, where we are fact-cheap nature. And that's important, the differential part. There is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. That which is, it's with all parts of English grammar, all about the invisible but still discernible. For example, the subject. We can only appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneous to an extent. And where and how we can discern that simultaneously, we know there is a further. There is further what is greater than and more finite than that. And so incapable of being that, but as it anyway. It is that same identity of value / value progression that is not our species' body of individual bodies. It is not the other species' bodies of individual bodies. It is that, but it is all things anyway. So it is, and it is that which is generating all group differences. But where and how we have been systems tactical ulterior from its own. A breaching method invented how they could get people to, how it made hyper additional, uses of differences as systems, forced, tricked, and hurt and persuaded while adapting to what the hyperforeign did, not as countries A through Z, but as a method that forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded the only people who could operate the names A through Z. To force, checked, hurt, and persuaded to blame what the hyperforeign did. Not as names A through Z, but through them. To blame other things, others, ourselves for that. And then to have that countered by the other names of the human species body, of individual bodies, wrongly. And it defended, but correctly, because they had the counter too, not understanding and discerning, nor discerning the breaching methods roles with it, the hyperforeign, archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers too are recorded too, collusions with all sides of cases and the courts and their state judicial branch offices and their state corrections offices, equivalents at locations, areas, and states everywhere the human species body has a body standing We have been systems tactically ulterior from this that is inseparable from our short words, let alone from the value of their protraction. How this has been gotten away with is relative to where and to how you guys have had forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded self-value rules with predicate acts with facts. For example, that which the hyper-foreign, so to speak, that which had slavery, for example, before America's founders were born, entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, and there were more than 13 colonies entrenched. Excuse me. Thank God for the Native Americans, too, who coupled with the colonists behind and as James Madison and his plan. The only one of them we know, the names of, certainly. We know there were more than one. There's more than James Madison and the Native Americans. In other words, were part of it, had to help, even if it, just the resistance to the breaching method. It's the same breaching method against every single human species body. All differences that used to be hide behind and through that, but through our own perceptions, voices, nature's uses. Otherwise, that body is sensed and it is adapted to by the breaching method easily, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it is every single body of an entire country together. This is like, for example, black people, this is why not one has discerned the whites of eyes, ciphered to be deciphered, even though our fathers left declassified for themselves and for us about why and about how they did not have free speech and had to pretend other to an extent /s and or to be sensed, not just by the internationally monitored conversations that ask questions and force that to be entertaining. And you said this, but that was poetry then. And in other words, the state of Connecticut corrections officers and judicial branch officers also has a number of involvements with people from Russia and with people from Ukraine and with ambassadors in ways that, in other words, they are not capable of dealing with honestly, but we can change it like that because it's recorded now. See, what is people communicate is distinct from what they say. And in some ways, it is greater than, more finite, what we communicate than what we say. In fact, many ways. But the difference of that is also shown to us. Nature is showing us to being led by that which is hyper invisible but still discernible. True always. Like if the slightest sequence shift is self-value, there's something we're using its system. So in other words, the news has identity theft, fraud, slanders against little kids, people of all ages. They've been putting fake transcripts and roles with all natures of investigations. Investigators use remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. And they've been using words like crimes, forgivenesses, because this is in ways they are only capable of it. But then they can't defend that without self-valuing, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, fact, human nature, quality, aspects of nature, being and having been involved with, and as the value of their appreciation formally and everyone else informally, in private, with the law, words like crimes. See, the courts have rules of predicate acts with facts methods, much worse natures of crimes and of organized crimes and methods. Federal evidence is racketeering methods worse than war crimes, for example, so to speak. I'm not a lawyer. Again, lawyers are recorded, planting evidences and collusion /s with names on all sides of cases, crime scenes, at the crime scene. The courts, the same thing, the different natures of conjunctions to them, their neighbors. All those things are used, and they're set up to keep being used, to keep remote uses of the locations interbranch, of all locations /s differences, per this method that reassign what nature communicates with difference. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. We have eyes differently from the fish, but non-distinctly too. See, we are distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous. That's what we are being shown with the species body's volume science system, per that which is also further slash hyper simultaneous. And is that way, three ways. Hyper invisible but still discernible, where parts of itself are manifest with that individual identity of value progression. The ways we could see it, the individual ways we can see it. It's individual identity of value progression. Nature shows us that it is not our species body. It is not the other species bodies. That is the complete identity of value progression. That is behind the question why and how. In other words, we are species bodies. And with these quality aspects of nature, simultaneous, but also per that further, not us nor them, as a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature, which is one of the reasons I'm referring to it as the hyper simultaneous. So Russians and Americans have roles with fire departments together and medical campuses, where they have roles with psychiatry through world wars, where all sides had collusions with the interbranch in ways relative to where and how witch trials are about this, regardless of there's and why and how the witch trials place. And Old Wethersfield, Connecticut, is right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. But people not realizing also then and now, so three ways is being obfuscated and replaced what our founders communicated for us to understand about Webb House and why and how. There's a witch trials place next to it, regardless if it was completely made up or who made them up, or what or why. Regardless of that, we know that there were slavery laws entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, and roles where they had been sustained before America's founders were born. We know that the databases were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. We know that the news at the same time was. We know that people will pretend other. Where and how they get away with that? They are recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirm self-valued roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, fact-achieving nature, quality aspects in nature, and sequence shifts, collusion /S with the breaching method, showing people how to self-value roles with the uses of our founders, which is James Madison's words, and what he declassified for us to about his communications, and why and how to understand that distinct from his words and from all the rest of the people's words. They had to counter-extort the rest of the presidents / chiefs and the rest of the colonists and the Native Americans. In other words, and they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, even though they didn't want to. Here's Ron Adams again. This Ron Adams has roles planted with federal evidence as crimes with the Britain Superior Court and with the Connecticut Judicial Branch offices and corrections offices, with sexual and medical offenders of kids. Also with the Joshua, as his collusions with the Joshua Julian, I also don't know, on the Facebook page of a principal upskirt nature, as one of the ones that was forcing that. Also with some black KKK, Confederate flag team, I don't know, that are increasingly involved with people trying to make fake exceptions to make it look like that. With some black KKK, Confederate flag team, Latino thing, collusion /S with male and female judges at the Britain Superior Court, with people putting fake things in their databases, foreign and domestic military. Increasingly, they have roles with Harper Courts and Connecticut's District Court, with people on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, intercities through times. They're keeping whole careers, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Every year since the World Trade Center attack, people that were collusions interstates and internationally before it, and at the World Trade Center and spots next to it, including the court next to it. The court itself put a sequence shift from inside the court, and all sides of the case and their sources were all also people tied to Ron Adams directly and indirectly with his syntax involved also like on YouTube with the Joshua Julian, involved with FBI and Weathersfield Police with some sexual and medical offenders, retired police chiefs, involved also with a Ray Cololo on YouTube, also with some medical offenders of kids and sexual, and judges, family members, and their extended family members involved with them, putting fake transcripts in databases, including at the Weathersfield Police Department. So this Ron Adams is a sick guy with other police that are refusing to identify themselves, forging, switching names, refusing to get on paper. And they have courts, a bunch of courts, and people with Fox News involved with Judge Napolitano, with Ron Adams too sometimes. And nature, no, too. We're going to observe criminal and seditious nature. It's I'm not even a lawyer, but we can do this, people, black pupils. So Ron Adams has rules also with Weathersfield Police Facebook page with Joshua Schumack and his mother. I don't know his mother's name. His mother's, I never had a conversation with her. He tried to make there are proofs that he was one with the ones with a Mark Violet and a Mike Violet involved with intelligence families next to Harvard Hospital, with a bunch of people that are intercities involved with campuses, that people that don't even know each other, that never in classes. They're putting fake things in backgrounds and then acting tied to that, predicate acts with facts. And they're building off that as collusion/S with crime scenes in a method that keeps them hiding what the real value is of their roles with arrests and with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and interbranch names in foreign at the same time, and news putting in the same sequence as predicate acts, federal evidence is crime, whole wire crime acts and methods. So that's why it's relative to where and to how. In other words, we have people still pretending that they believe things about voting or parties, and they're pretending not to realize that and how the polling locations are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Quinnipiac University has rules with all kinds of natures of organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. And just like little magic tricks, like a magician could go before a stage, the intelligence community fakes recorded things by putting fake transcripts on campuses, filmed 24/7, and other ties to that, other tricks with that. But also, they have people act and have things filmed. Where and how in the background, the breaching method already used effectively, collusion/S with itself, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the courts, names, the state judicial branch offices, corrections offices, at the same time, putting the same sequence with news and names that next to body dumping spots, and roles involved with criminal enterprises and private ones, and terrorists. WFSB Channel 3 News at the same time to prevent anything legitimate with the law and the writing of the law. They're lying about the outcomes of legal cases. WFSB has a bunch of people involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, leaking with them their rules with the Intelligence Act next to their location in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, with foreign and domestic military. Involved also with World Trade Center predicate acts before and after the World Trade Center attack. You had better get me off the fake conversations because they're demonstrating. And it's also communications because they did communicate with me. They have all kinds of wire crime acts and methods with the people. The difference of the ones with the people with the phones that work for them, they're just changing and faking what's recorded. Or the ones with the wire crime acts and methods, like with Roger Suzanne and others who faked conversations with me and knowing and with me with others when he was forcing his kids' roles also with the kids of New Britain Superior Court and of Hartford courts and their intimate ties, and in the Connecticut District Court involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, and the families involved with that years apart, still as kids victims that are now adults, collusions with it. It's relative to where and how they kept each year collusions with organized crime acts and methods. They're keeping the whole careers of people criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Then they want to pretend they're caring for police. They can't even afford to have what that is actually recorded value as. They're fake. So in other words, that's because locations, areas, and states are constantly forcing leaders to entertain their styles, natures of fact, cheap nature as they are actually recorded. This preaching method effectively used and uses all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts and the news, and a way worse at the same time, kept me to self-value the same sequence shifts to keep style, to keep them in the future when that comes up with relativity of other things increasingly self-value, that the details left out and fake. Excuse me. Mother!